Good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Kulaga, Executive Creative Director of the New York Times live conversation series Times Talks, and our new film series ScreenTimes, which hosts exclusive screenings of the most eagerly awaited new movies, documentaries, indies, and more. I want to give special thanks to the presenting sponsor of ScreenTimes, HBO, and share the following preview of coming attractions.
Madeline, you are not the only parent complaining, just by far the loudest.
Cupcake? Melissa, I don't even like to chew. I just shove them down. Maybe you can give one hand to Warren so he can shove it too.
Ah, and we're off. It's a classy crop of moms, these ones.
People think that I am unhinged.
Pretty much.
That one, she's the Medusa of Monterey. I will squish you like the bug that you are.
Let second grade begin.
I still feel responsible for the accident.
It's gonna get us. It's gonna get us all.
What are you talking about?
The lie.
This detective is just trying to put the pressure on us so that one of us breaks.
You don't believe my son just slipped.
Maybe this time I can be strong.
He knows that I lie to him.
We swallow our feelings, especially the bad ones. They could turn into really ugly monsters.
Do you see yourself as a monster?
I can just see the damage that's done, and it's eroding every single one of us.
My son is dead, and I want answers.
I gave you answers.
Yes, but you left some things out, didn't you? You were planning to leave him. And you learned of his infidelity just 10 seconds before he died. Oh, you left that out, too.
And now, please join me in welcoming New York Times culture reporter Melena Ryzik and our special guests, the director of Yesterday, Danny Boyle, screenwriter Richard Curtis, and lead actor Himesh Patel.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I am as excited to be here as you are. I want you to know we were all singing along backstage, too. Congratulations on the film, you guys. It's a lot of fun. Obviously, the audience here enjoyed it. We're going to have a short conversation, hopefully answer some of the questions you might have, and get a little bit more of the backstory of how you guys came together to make this. Now, the germ of this story started with actually another writer. The concept came from another writer. I wanted to know what charmed you all into doing it. I know at least one of you was like a Beatles diehard with a camp-out story. Himesh, not you, right? Yes.
No, yes, I've had a long Beatles life. I had two older sisters, so I was 7, I think, when babysitters when I was young used to come around with those little boxes full of 45s. And the moment my parents walked out the door, they'd take off Nat King Cole and put on the Beatles and the Supremes. And I remember, certainly being outside the Foresta Hotel in Stockholm in the freezing cold 3 nights in a row, waiting for the Beatles to come onto the balcony. It never occurred to us that we could go and see them performing. It didn't seem, I don't think my dad had ever been to a pop concert. So the moment I heard the idea, and just the idea of being able, to be typing, and then at any point when I got stuck, go to the Beatles catalogue and say, Long and Winding Road. That'll help. So, it was a dream for me. And it also had lots of other things as I worked on the idea, like all of us feeling like imposters, which we still do, and also just trying to think what the valuable things in your life are, between love and work, and all those things. So I developed it, and then I wrote it, And then I happened to get literally randomly, an email from Danny about something, and then he just put a PS saying, if you've got any scripts, do send them my way. And I said to my girlfriend, who's in charge of my life, I said, look, it would just be embarrassing. He'll never do it. And she said, oh, go on. And then you received it.
Yeah, so I'd written to him, you know, the way you do, like, politely, saying, if you're ever... don't forget to think of me, but I didn't really mean it. It was like, it was just being polite.
No, he tells me.
And then he sent this script. I returned, and I thought, oh, it's Richard Curtis. I've got to read it. So I read it, and I thought it was. I wrote straight back to him, and I said, and it's a curious, and it's absolutely genuine. This I said, it has unborrowed genius in it, Richard, and it's a phrase that. Samuel Taylor Coleridge used about William Wordsworth's work. And it's bizarre because although he then wrote back, we should have talked to each other, shouldn't we? But then he wrote back saying, it's funny you should mention that, ironically, because it is borrowed, because this other guy had come up with the idea. But what Richard had done with it was so affectionate and so touching and so... And as you work on the songs, they have such... There's a note in there of melancholy amongst all the joy, and there is joy, huge joy in working on stuff with them. There's a melancholy in there as well, which is very like Wordsworth, weirdly, or the English poets, you know, and about the landscape or something like that. Anyway, so it's something that you just can dive into, you know. You don't think about agents or is it a good idea or all, you know, tactically for career or anything
Still
like that.
paid him 10%, didn't we?
The agents, absolutely, yeah. It was, you know, it's one of those easy ones, you know. You just.
And then we
swimming.
thought, we'll never find anyone to play the lead. The songs are too good.
Now, Himesh, this is your first feature film. You've been an actor for a number of years, but it's your first movie role. Well, maybe tell me about the audition process, and Danny, tell me why you think you nailed it.
So I was actually in New York when I first heard about this project. I was doing a play at the end of 2017, and this email came through. It said, Danny Boyle, working title, it's got musical elements, and you have to do a monologue from a play that they'd chosen, and I had to sing a Coldplay song of my choice, preferably with accompaniment. So I borrowed my friend Steph's guitar, and I did this song, We Never Change by Coldplay, and then did this monologue, sent it off. And then I was on a bus to Boston for a little couple of days, jaunt to Boston, and I heard that Danny Boyle wants to meet you. You have to come back to London a day early. Also, they're going to send you the script. It's by Richard Curtis. And I thought, okay. And so then by the time I got back to New York, I had a couple of days in New York in this little Airbnb. I remember just being sat on this bed for like half a day, just reading this script and blown away by it, you know. So then I met Danny and Richard back in London, and we had a nice. What was it, half an hour? 45, felt like 10 seconds to me, but it was amazing.
It was particularly nice for us because we were, by that time, in despair, as you always are when you're trying to cast the lead.
Yes. And sick of Yesterday by that point as well. Because everybody comes in and plays Yesterday.
So the first song I sang was Yesterday. And then I did Back in the USSR, which you quite liked, my version of that, apparently.
Yes, I started dancing around during USSR, which is not what directors are meant to do during auditions. So it gave him too big a clue, which could tip off his agent, and therefore in negotiations, you know. But it was fantastic because it was. We were in despair, like Richard said, because we saw some very talented people, really talented, who were probably much better singers than Himesh, and certainly. Well, certainly much better guitarists, anyway. But the songs had no soul. They were like karaoke, or they were improved versions of the Beatles, which is a very dangerous thing to contemplate by adding extra notes and things like that. And then he came in and he sang them in a way it's a very difficult thing to define, but it's why the word exists to describe it. It had soul, really. and he connected with the songs and made them feel like they were his songs, and yet we were going, no, they're not. That's Paul McCartney's song. You know, so it was a wondrous moment for us. Yes, very special.
And then 50% of actors aren't funny at all, as you know. I could name many of them, and he was very good at the jokes too. So it was a happy day.
Well, for a lot of people, the Beatles catalog is like the lingua franca of music, and people, of course, have really personal connections to the songs. Why did you guys think, you know, we are going to be able to provide a new context for this music? Did you feel any sort of trepidation around that, to put it in this new world?
I thought it was a wonderful prism to look at them through. So rather than it being a straight biopic or a life story or something like that, and it's curious, of course, and speaks to their sense of humour, the sense of humour of the band, that the film they did sanction was a film that saw them erased from the world's consciousness entirely. I thought that's a wonderful concept to look at them through, really. So that the struggles he has of impersonation, imposterism, or, you know, whatever the word is for that, are wonderfully live ways of looking at something that we're all familiar with, or a lot of people would be familiar with anyway.
But also my experience as a dad is so much to do with basically almost every school play I went to ended with a Beatles song. I remember going to see the Battle of Hastings very convincingly reenacted by some 7-year-olds, and then it ended up with you know, William the Conqueror holding Harold's hand, and they sang "We Can Work It Out." But that's that feeling that it is being handed down in all sorts of shapes and forms, and my 15-year-old plays them a lot on the piano. So there is a feeling that they're there for the taking, and that it's not only the recordings, but they're now part of... I remember Elvis Costello introducing All You Need Is Love at Live Aid by saying, here's an old English folk song. And I think there was actually an element of truth in that.
Himesh, what about for you? Because you had to not only, you know, perform these songs convincingly, but make them your own, as Danny said, while also realizing that the mantle of the music is upon you as a performer.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. I didn't grow up with the Beatles as much as Danny and Richard did, because I'm you know, first generation immigrant. So my parents, when they first came to the UK, the Beatles had just finished. Obviously, you know, they never finished. They're still with us today. Look, we're making a film about them 50 years after the last gig. But they, you know, they weren't there for the taking in the same way. And so it wasn't like I grew up listening to them. You know, they were just kind of there as they are for all of us. And I'd listen to a couple of albums and you know, all the songs that we all know by the time I walked into the room and sang these songs for Danny and Richard. So maybe there was something about the fact that I wasn't as in awe of them as I am now, you know, having gone through the journey of having to learn these songs and go on and learn about the band and understand their journey and just how culturally significant they are. Maybe it was slightly less intimidating to begin with, but then I remember the first, after Danny had called me up and offered me the part, and we sat down with Daniel Pemberton, the composer, in Daniel's flat, and Danny had made a list of all the songs that were going to be in the film, and I just looked, I've got a photo of that still, and I looked at it and I just went, oh. You know, there was about 20, just over 20 tracks in that draft of the script, and I had to, you know, learn them all. So we set up this room in the offices, made it look like Jack's bedroom, which was quite fun, and I spent 2.5 months in there kind of learning the songs for the first part, getting them under my fingers, but of course, then we had to shape them. We had to make them our own. We had to make them new, and that was the challenge. That was the fun bit of it.
And it's very interesting because you have to be very careful with the recording of music, because it can become a very technical process, and recording engineers always want to record the song beforehand and get Himesh to play along to it, literally, to lip sync to it, or to replace it later. And we were adamant that in order to keep this quality that we'd perceived in him in the original audition, that everything in the film should be live. And everything that you've heard tonight is Himesh live in that auditorium, and his playing is live as well. And we've embellished the background band occasionally with overdubs, but the rest of it is live, and that was a quality again to try and retain that soulful quality you get, and his connection with the songs.
Did you always realize that you had a musical talent?
I always enjoyed singing. When I was a lot younger, I did. I used to sing along to all sorts of songs on the radio and tapes and that kind of thing. And then, weirdly, I lost my confidence as a teenager because of Let It Be. I was at youth theatre, and we were doing this, like, you know, all of us were singing Let It Be together, and I got singled out because I'd shown a talent for singing. I got singled out to sing like the main line of the song. And that second Let It Be of the chorus is just out of my range, or at least it was back then. And my voice was breaking, you know, and she was trying to get me to engage my core and get to the note, and my voice just squeaked, you know, it sounded like an alarm going off, and it floored me, and my confidence just went through the floor. And then teenage years happened, you know, all that. But I found it in the last few years, and I'd been trying to teach myself guitar until I got this job, you know, I hadn't had any sort of formal training. And I played piano before that, and so it'd always been part of my life. I can't go a day without listening to music, you know. I mean, it's been an amazing journey, really, to find my confidence again as a singer, and to kind of find my confidence that I can kind of pursue guitar and maybe get a bit better at it. Yeah.
You guys mentioned getting the rights, which was a conversation I understand started before you even came on board, and not an easy thing to do in any case, but especially when you have such a big catalog. Did you ever think that you had a prayer of getting all these songs, especially the songs that you particularly might have wanted for the film?
We sort of submitted the idea quite soon, about halfway through. I know a guy called Jonathan Clyde who works at Apple, and I think it was sort of presented to him. You know, if it had been The Life of Ted Bundy, Beatles enthusiast, I think they might have said no, but it seemed quite benign, you know, being a film to do with love, actually, and the Beatles. So I think, you know, it was step by step until they came up with a brilliant and complicated deal whereby we were actually allowed to choose any songs in certain combinations, isn't that right? Or 3 of one, 2 of the other, 4 of one.
And we could change that at the last minute. So it could be unknown songs from the catalogue or the famous ones from the catalogue. It was only up to a limit of 18 or 20. Yeah.
That's very lucky.
So we could put Obla Di Obla Da in very late, and we said to Himesh, you've got to learn Obla Di Obla Da as well, and sing that in front of 600 school children.
So who all had to learn it, by the way. The first version of that scene, they were not as confident about the words, were they? Lots of children who'd never heard it before, thinking, what are those 2 words?
Who are these British school children who've never heard Obla Di?
Oh yeah, no. I mean, it's interesting the way you do that, the way you find people who, you know, they know some songs, but they wouldn't know Obla Di Obla Da. I mean, the Beatles themselves, apart from Paul, who wrote that song, wouldn't play Obla Di Obla Da. And famously, they gave it away, didn't they, to a band called Marmalade. Yeah. Because the other Beatles refused to play it and didn't want it released as a single, and it then went, in Marmalade's version, it went to #1 for...
Huge #1.
5 weeks, which must have made Paul very, very happy indeed.
All very angry, you have no, all very.
I want to talk a little bit more about the casting. What did Ed Sheeran say when you first called him for the part? He wasn't actually the first person you thought of, right?
No, we asked. It was originally written for Chris Martin, who, and then Danny made the mistake of lying to Ed, didn't you? When he said, "Am I your first choice?"
Oh yeah, so because of course we went. So Chris Martin couldn't do it because he was busy. So then Richard put in that very cruel joke about "fix you" in in response to his unavailability, and we said to Ed, "You're our first choice," and he said, "No, I'm not. You've already asked Chris Martin." And he said, "And then you asked Harry Styles, so I'm third." And we didn't ask Harry Styles at all. No. In fact, Harry Styles is his invention. But he was wonderful, actually. And it's weird the way the story reflects his life.
Yeah, in a way, the movie's about Ed, with Ed in it, because I've known Ed for a long time, and he lives up in Suffolk, so he lives exactly where the movie happened. And it's sort of his story of going from very unlikely hero to huge superstar. But one of the things I love most about Ed is that after having roamed the world, he came home and married a girl he was at school with. So as it were, he's the proof of the pudding, that he's managed to find this mixture between, you know, all the international stuff and being completely, you know, at home and living in the village that he, you know, went to school in and everything. So it would have been slightly hurtful, to be honest, to have that bastard Chris Martin playing playing his role. No, look, Chris is very nice and gracious.
The idea of being kind of authentic as an artist is obviously a through line of the movie, and of course, you know, the more famous and successful you get, the more difficult it is to maintain sometimes a purity of vision. I'm curious about what you guys have all done in your own lives and careers to kind of keep yourself in check. I know, Himesh, your parents, even when you were on the British soap EastEnders, made you have a paper route.
Yes, my parents run a newsagent in a little village in Cambridgeshire, which is where I grew up. And yeah, for the first 5 years that I was on EastEnders, I was on national TV but I was still doing the paper round, or the paper route, as you guys call it. But yeah, I was doing that. Often I'd be driving to London to film, and my dad would be like, "Can you just drop these two off on your way to the motorway?"
And you were in the paper every day. That's the point, because EastEnders was on every day, so it was just marketing.
Sometimes, yeah, they would be, yeah.
Do you feel like that was helpful to you as a person or as a performer?
No. But now you understand why it was so important. Yeah.
Well, no. When you're up, I've got 3 kids still at home, and they've just stopped laughing at my jokes. They just say, "That's just wordplay, Dad. It's not a joke." So I'm a fraud. I'm a fraud every day. But even with Danny, I remember saying often, "No, it's going to be funny, Danny. Just this is a funny scene." And then I'd think, "Is it a funny scene? I've got no idea." So I think you go on feeling you don't know what you're up to.
Oh, my kids. Well, yeah, kids keep you honest. My kids used to. When I was a bit younger, I used to look quite like Morrissey. Because we come from a very similar background, an Irish background out to Manchester, and they used to, so you'd come down for breakfast and there'd be a picture of Morrissey on the wall, really, the real hero, as they saw him at the time. They've changed their minds since, but they keep you honest, yeah.
How much of the movie did you want to be a sort of commentary about what it takes to be a musician now versus, you know, in the era when there were like fewer marketing people involved?
Oh, the marketing meeting of meetings, which was so we had you do test screenings, and then you know when the film is evolving in editing, you show it to the studio, and they're often quite tense affairs because you're in an auditorium. It could be this size, and there's only like half a dozen or 10 of them, the top studio executives watching what you've done so far, and they came to that scene and they all started high-fiving each other. I mean, like literally, like they'd written it or something, and it was their idea. And then they were very excited at the end. They kind of sort of rushed us out to show us this room, which also had descending blinds, where they held their own marketing meeting of meeting scene.
But you've been in that room, haven't you? Because it's a WME, and I think when you won your Oscar, you were led in, and all the agents.
Yeah. Yes, I had a version of that scene. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So it's all based on real life. Yes. Real Los Angeles life.
Right. But speaking of, you know, test screenings and studio involvement, Himesh is a non-traditional lead. This is his first film. What kind of feedback did you get when you said, "This is the person I want to cast for this role"?
No, I mean, the thing about a Beatles movie... The thing about a Beatles movie is that it's expensive, because the rights to the songs are expensive. And in fact, it's the second most expensive item I've ever had on a budget on a film that I've been involved in. So you can understand that the studio are looking for a star, really. They're looking for something that they can sell or is familiar. And obviously, Himesh was only... I kept saying to them, he's on EastEnders. And it didn't really mean very much to them, sadly, in Universal. But no, they were wonderful, actually. And Donna Langley. And they test you, you know, because what they're doing is they're testing your conviction in an actor as well. They're not only, obviously, longing for it to be, I don't know, Ryan Gosling or whatever, you know, whatever dream factory.
That famous Suffolk lad.
They can come up with. But they're testing your conviction as well and your belief. And they...
What was the most expensive thing?
Oh, Leonardo DiCaprio's fee in The Beach.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
Thank you for that follow-up, Richard. Appreciate that.
But they're testing your conviction, and it's... And that's a wonderful thing for a movie, because you're also forced to ask yourself, is this the right person for the film? And it always was, as Richard said, it always was, and it was meant to be Himesh. And they're the easiest decisions to make when somebody comes in like that, because casting then doesn't become a negotiation even in your own head. It just becomes, well, it would be a crime not to cast him. You know, I had it once before with Kelly Macdonald in Trainspotting, who she'd done a lot less than Himesh had ever done. But she walked in and you just thought, that's the part, you know, that's the person. It's preordained, really. It's in the stars, so.
And then we saw Lily, didn't we? And that was, you know, easy and wonderful, and she was just doing Mamma Mia with them, and I think she's particularly brilliant in the film because she's got to pour in all that emotion. You've got he has to sort of resist it, and we actually asked Lily to read, and I think we stopped her after about a minute and a half and said, I think the part is yours.
Himesh, for you, besides, you know, the weight of it being your first film and then realizing at some point, oh, I have to do the whole Beatles catalog, did you also think about what the impact would be of having somebody like yourself play this kind of role?
To some extent, yes. To be honest, really, it's only kind of coming home to me now, in the last few months since the trailer came out. And now people are seeing the movie, and you know, it would have meant a lot to me when I was growing up to see someone who looked like me playing a role like this in a film like this. And in fact, the only time, one of the other big moments was when Danny did it with Slumdog. When you go and watch a movie like that and you go, wow, someone like me is on a big screen. I guess I can do it.
Did you ask any of the Beatles for the remaining Beatles for their seal of approval, or the estates?
Well, you obviously to license. They're very careful that the songs are not mislicensed, as they see it. That they're not given to, I don't know, presidential candidates or, you know, or whatever like that. So,
Fool on a Hill.
So it was wonderful that they approved of such an insolent idea of their own work disappearing forever, or the threat of it. So you have their go ahead, really. And we sent the finished film to them, and we got lovely messages back from Ringo and Barbara and from Olivia George's widow. Beautiful messages back, and that's lovely. And it's not their film, and they don't want it to be their film, and we don't want it to be their film. It's something where we meet, you know, we meet in the middle, and so it retains its own identity. And obviously we'll be around for a little while with it, and their work history will never overtake. So you know, that's great.
Oh, I was having this conversation today with a music colleague who said, if the premise of this movie were true, you know, if the Beatles didn't exist and they suddenly came to be, what songs of theirs would actually be popular?
I think it's all. That's I mean, but the more we've worked on it, Ed's just releasing a new album, and he's releasing a single every 2 weeks off it, and you just think the Beatles would have been able to do that for 4 years, release a song, and imagine if that was the next song, and then that was the next song, and then that was the next song. I mean, our experience, I think, is to feel even more that they're not dated, and the richness of the tunes, and the brilliance of the lyrics, and the variety. That's the shocking thing about the Beatles, the variety is so extraordinary. I think people would be lost in wonder.
I think that medley on Abbey Road, on the second half of Abbey Road, is one of the most extraordinary and revolutionary things of just hodgepodging all those things together in that piece of music that makes up the second side of that album. The variety is absolutely extraordinary, and we were expecting the songs to date, I think, you know, to feel a little dated at times. They didn't at all. They felt fresh. I think that a lot of that's a tribute to Himesh, but obviously some of the credit must go to Paul McCartney and John Lennon and George Harrison.
Just some. What's amazing though is when you do what we had to do, which was like initially it was just me and a guitar or me and a piano in a room, but you realise how amazing these songs are, despite obviously we've got an amazing production and all the stuff that George Martin did and the four of them did together. But when you strip it back, the songs are still incredible. I think that speaks to any amazing song. If you just put it back to one person, one instrument, and it still stands up, then that's a mark of a great song.
So what is your relationship now to this music, having listened to it so often, thought about it so much in making the film and listened to it so often, really in such a short span as you're making it in production? I mean, Richard, you're like a lifelong fan, but is it possible to have had your relationship deepened already, or do you find new things still in this music?
I mean, I always do, because they embody the thing that they are. So, the Beatles always cheer me up or make you feel... I mean, I feel I wouldn't have written any of my films if Paul McCartney hadn't written And I Love Her. It's just the basis. But I think it's actually a particular new joy. I didn't listen to the Beatles while I was writing the film, because I had to try and reproduce Jack's situation. And now, of course, it's nice listening to their apparently only moderately good production of their own songs. Because I think, those violins on Yesterday are excellent, aren't they? So I think that I've now almost got two songs in my mind, which is kind of fun.
So we put there's right at the end of the film, there's the four girls screaming, caught in a moment like that, and it's very interesting because those girls were condemned back in Britain as being hysterical, sexual hysteria, all that. But those girls knew something. They were telling the world was about to change. And in fact, they were responsible, really, for forcing a spotlight on the Beatles, which prevented them being just a passing pop moment. Because I think it also fused them into writing, using that attention, that power to write. And the change they brought in pop culture, the devotion not to duty and obligation and the army and everything that had gone before in Europe, but to youthfulness and energy and love and pleasure and self-expression, is something that we've maintained, I think, and we continue to live in, really. So we put that shot of the girls there as a kind of tribute to them, because they often go, the girls often know what's coming. They may not be able to articulate it at that moment, but they know what it is that's coming, really. Anyway.
I almost want to leave it there, but we have time for maybe one more question. Just as like a fun thought experiment, one of the things that the movie does is sort of imagine this alternate reality. I'm not going to give any spoilers for those people who are watching out in internet land, but there might be other things that are missing from the world as we know it, and I wonder if you guys had like a brainstorming session where you thought, should we write this one out?
But actually, yeah, there are a bunch of things, and they're pretty random, actually. They're pretty random. There are some that I'm glad have gone, and there are some that I'm sorry have gone. But that was just a fun bit, that about every 10 minutes in the film it turns out that something else is gone.
And as a thought experiment, some people out in internet land have decided what would have happened if the Beatles hadn't existed. Did you guys allow yourself that
Well, it's really, I mean, we particularly pick out one band as not having recorded any music at all. It's, I don't know, I think half of ELO would be gone. I think quite a chunk of Crowded House. I don't think Brian Wilson would have written Pet Sounds. He would have thought, I'm the best, I don't have to bother to get better. So, but then there are the huge cultural things. I remember once talking to my friend Paul Greengrass, who's deeply wise, who made the Bourne films and things, and I said, what are the most important moments in the history of media? And he said, number one's the shot of the Earth from the moon, as we redefined. And he said, I think number two is then the first ever global broadcast, the Beatles singing All You Need Is Love, that instead of being an advert for Stockholm, or some pretty pictures of Ayers Rock, that you had these young men saying to the entire world that may be the solution. And I do think that is very embedded in sort of faith of our generation.
like I want to ask one more question. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Let's end on this note. You know, you guys mentioned a little bit the idea that there are some young people who don't know what the Beatles are, who don't. You know, there was a music award ceremony a couple years ago where Paul McCartney started trending, and there was the idea that maybe people were asking, "Who is this guy again?" And if this movie succeeds in introducing the music to a newer generation, is that part of your hope, your goal with the film?
It wasn't really the goal with the film, but I think it'll be a wonderful part of the purpose. There's something about movies that allow you to explore time, which is, I think, I mean, this has been said before, really, about the nature of film, that really what we do as filmmakers is we compress time or extend it or stop it, start it, the wonderful. And what makes it different, for instance, to long-form television now, is that you're the difference, is that you give us 2 hours of your exclusive time to see us work with time, really. And to be able to go back into time and imagine things differently, really, you know, and playfully, in this case, because the sense of humour of the Beatles and Monty Python and all those things is very much in keeping with Richard's idea in the film and the comic identity of the film. So it's a wonderful way to be able to explore time and then just renew it, really, and to tempt with the idea that you can reimagine time, really. I suppose that's the purpose, I suppose.
Yeah, if anyone is watching who hasn't listened to the Beatles, I think we can confidently say they are a very good band. The albums are definitely worth listening to. Their greatest song is called "This Boy." So there's lots more.
Well, thank you guys for coming. Thank you guys for coming and joining us. Thank you for allowing us to time travel with the movie. You guys have been a great audience. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.